And we are here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Lopes Goes Last podcast. I, of course, am your host, Tyler Lopes. If you have not subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Also, hit that bell icon so you never miss any one of my videos. Also, please like and share the video so that we can help this thing grow. Also, please do follow me on Twitter at Lopes Goes Last and at Lopes Goes Last podcast on Facebook. The links for that will be down in the description below. So yes, obviously you can probably see new haircut, trim the beard a little bit, trying to look a little bit less like there's something very wrong with me. So that's obviously, just wanted to address that up front. And also, as you can see here, I've got a little bit of a new background here. My lovely wife also painted me a fantastic painting of the Red Sox, Patriots, and Celtics, as you can see there. So that's going to be, hopefully at least, a permanent backdrop of the podcast, at least for a good while. I plan on at least having it forever, but I suppose you never really do know what the future holds. But I'm very proud of it, as you can tell, and I wanted to just talk about that a little bit before we get started. So, obviously, if you guys saw last week's podcast, it was a much different episode than what I had normally been doing. This week, we're going to get back to more of a semblance of normalcy. So strap in, and we will jump right into our current events. Not a lot to speak of this week for the three major sports, but we do have, I'm going to start off today's podcast with a little bit of a smaller story, at least by comparison to some of the ones that we've been talking about over the last few weeks. And this is just a little bit of a follow-up on the Brian Flores story. So I think this story, again, while it is a little bit small in comparison, I think it's pretty interesting if you really think about kind of the implications of what it could mean. So for those of you who are not familiar with what I'm talking about with the Brian Flores stuff, so Brian Flores, former head coach of the Miami Dolphins, is suing the NFL and various teams for racial discrimination in their hiring practices, among a few other things, but mainly racial discrimination in their hiring practices. And that same Brian Flores, again, who is suing the NFL, just accepted the job to become the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive assistant and linebackers coach. So, obviously, pretty interesting development there. I find it interesting just in the case of, how is that going to be perceived, I would say, in terms of his lawsuit. You say that, you couldn't find a job or that there's racism in hiring practices, but, less than a month later, you got yourself a job in the NFL. So, how much validity does that have? I'm sure that there will be people that will make that argument. But I think the thing that I find most interesting about this is kind of just the way it kind of comes full circle. So the rule that is in question, or at least one of the main rules that is in question in Brian Flores' lawsuit, is in fact the Rooney Rule, which for those of you who do not know, is the rule in the NFL. I believe it was implemented in 2003, if I have my facts correct. But whatever it is, it's been in place for quite a while now, and it has evolved over the last few years. But now, in its present form, the Rooney Rule is every single owner or team president, general manager, whatever, has to interview at least 2 minority candidates for every coaching vacancy that you have on your team, whether that's head coach, defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, any of your specialists, or whatever the case may be. You have to interview at least 2 minority coaches to fill that vacancy. You don't have to hire them necessarily, but you have to at least give them a chance to interview and convince you to hire them. And so, that is obviously, it's called the Rooney Rule, and it's called the Rooney Rule because it was named after a man named Dan Rooney, who was, in fact, the former owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, again, just hired Brian Flores to be their defensive assistant and linebackers coach. So, you could say that's, again, a little bit of coming full circle, or you could say that that's a nice splash of irony. Whichever way you want to look at that, feel free. I'm just giving you what I am seeing. I'm not going to tell you which way you should feel about it. That is completely up to you guys. But, again, in terms of the lawsuit, I'm not really sure how this helps Brian Flores make his point. But obviously, good for him. I'm glad he got another job. I would have really been sad to see a great coach like that not end up getting a job because of, he is suing the NFL, so I would have understood, but still would have been sad. He is a very good coach, and I think any team would be lucky to have his mind and have his work ethic and have his mentality on their sideline in any capacity, whether it's as a head coach or whether it's as a defensive assistant, as he'll be in Pittsburgh. But yeah, just an interesting kind of development for this story, and as always, I will give you guys more updates as this story develops in the weeks to come. And now it is time to move on to the MLB Lockout and, the weekly updates that I've been having to give you guys about this. And, I think I'm going to keep this one relatively short. And quite honestly, the reason is because I'm getting really sick of talking about it. And it has nothing to do with, the podcast or you guys. I definitely love this aspect of the job, but it's just kind of the principle of it, I'm getting really, really sick of having to say that the owners and the players are really far apart and that they have no, hope in a lot of ways of coming together anytime soon and figuring this out, on Thursday of last week, the owners and the players met for 15 minutes. The players presented their version of a compromise, which I will say is very eerily similar to other owner compromises that they've presented to the players in past CBAs and in this one. So obviously the owners kind of probably saw that they were getting something thrown in their face, said no, and immediately left the meeting. So the meeting again lasted 15 minutes. And here I am talking about it again for another week. I don't know how many weeks in a row this is. It's at least 3 or 4 at this point. And I don't agree with I don't necessarily agree with the players kind of throwing something in the owner's face, especially at this stage in the game where spring training has already been moved back a week. By the way, spring training has officially been moved back a week from February 28th, I believe, to March 5th. The original start date might be a day off or two, but no matter what, the new one is March 5th, so that's the most important thing. It's been moved back. But, again, while I don't agree with it at this stage, especially at this stage, I should say, I understand it. I mean, I really do understand the players in this kind of scenario because they're frustrated. I completely get it. And, they decided to throw that frustration in the owner's face and to make them see what the owners have been doing to the players for years. And basically, they're doing the thing where, somebody has done something a couple times and you don't like it, but they tell you to get over it, and then you do it to them and they freak out and you just go, well, it's not that funny when it happens to you, is it, buddy? That's basically what what the players are doing to the owners at this point. And again, I don't agree with it, but I do understand it. And again, like I said, spring training has been officially moved back to March 5th. And there is obviously still a chance that it could be delayed more. So you never really know what's going to happen here. And from what I understand, the MLB and the MLBPA have decided to take this week, starting today when I'm recording this on Monday, February 21st. They have taken this week, and they are going to meet every single day and try to come up with some kind of compromise, and they're working hard to get a deal done by the time, or not by the time season starts, but in order to start the season on time. I should clarify there. Gonna be honest here, guys. I don't think it's gonna happen. I do not think that we're gonna start the regular season on time. I do not think, I don't even know if we're going to have spring training. And there's a lot of reasons why I feel that way. And it's nothing necessarily that I've read, or at least it's, maybe loosely based off of what I've read and what I've watched. There's been a couple of videos that people have put out, players or non-players, analysts, whatever the case may be, that, don't really necessarily give me hope, but I kind of had this opinion before watching these videos anyway, so, if they are influenced by those, it's very loosely influenced, I should say, and one of the reasons is because, in certain core areas, in the core economics of the deal, in certain spots, the owners and the players are quite literally $100 million apart in their negotiations. I mean, that is a crazy amount. Think about it in terms of if it was an individual player. If, let's say, Corey Seager this past offseason, he went into the Dodgers front office and said, hey, I've played very well for you guys. I've been here my whole career. I want to stick around. Here's how much I think I'm worth. I think I'm worth 10 years, $300 million. Let's just say that's what he says he's worth. And the Giants say, okay, well, we think you're worth 10 years, $200 million. Do you think Corey Seager is going to be very happy with that? Do you think he's going to accept that offer? Nope, he's not. He's not going to be happy. He's probably not going to accept that offer, barring any unforeseen circumstances. If all the other teams agree that he's only worth $200 million, then he might end up signing it. But at that particular moment, when he believes he's worth $300 million and he doesn't have any kind of proof to say that he isn't, as in all the other owners have agreed at that point, there's nothing for him to go off of other than this is what I think I'm worth. He's not going to accept that deal at that time. And that's what I think is happening here with the owners and the players. They're so far apart in these negotiations. I don't see how in the world, either side is going to compromise enough to get there. Now, they're going to have to, right? Somebody's either going to have to go all the way right, all the way left, or the two sides are going to have to meet somewhere in the middle. It's going to happen eventually because I don't think the players or the owners think a solution to this is not playing baseball in 2022. I don't think that is an option for them. I mean, it might be, I guess, but that would just be really dumb if that's the case. But anyways, that's one of the reasons why I think that, a deal's, we're not going to start the regular season on time. A deal's probably not going to get done this week. And another reason I think is because, quite honestly, I think at this point, the owners really don't care if they start the season on time. I think that the owners are taking the chance that the players are going to give in. I think that they're trying to not offer the players even remotely close to what they want. Not even remotely close, which, again, I have to emphasize, the owners have not given anything remotely close to what the players have asked for. So, to me, right, I think that the owners are almost trying to play chess, where they are refusing to give the players anything, and they are hoping that it gets deep enough in the game, deep enough in negotiations, where, we're getting to the point where regular season games have been cut off. Maybe even before that, you never know. Or it's out, or maybe it's even after, where, we're missing a month of the season and the players and owners still aren't getting anything, and the players finally give in and say, fine, we'll take your barely coherent offer because we just want to play baseball. I think that is what the owners are trying to do. And it's terrifying to me. It is terrifying to me because, going back to the core economics of the deal, the owners, they haven't budged. Now, which is weird because it seems like the owners are at least trying to compromise on pretty much everything else. I mean, the draft, the Rule 4 players and stuff like that with minor league systems. They've, given out draft picks and stuff for, people calling up minor leaguers and going to the major league level, and if they perform well, they'll give draft picks as a reward to try and stop service time manipulation. They have at least come up with ideas to address what the players want in every area but the core economics. So, again, just to kind of summarize here, the players have proposed a lot of different things in these past CBA negotiations. And the owners have almost kind of said, okay, yeah, we can live with that. We can live with that in everything. But when it comes to the core economics of the game, when it comes out to actually coughing up even just a little bit more money in the grand scheme of things, the owners are just like, nope, I'm no way. I'm not doing it. And it's ridiculous. And what scares me more than anything here is that I'm worried that the players are going to have to give in because the owners are, I think at this point, the players may be the only ones that care about the season starting on time. And I understand. Listen, I understand that the media at this point is basically calling both sides ignorant and selfish. And I agree. I think that in a lot of ways, both sides are being selfish at this point. But I think that the difference here is the players are asking for, basically, when young players are performing at a very high level, they are basically asking for the owners to reward those young players with more money than they would have made otherwise for performing above the norm of what a person their age would. You know, like somebody like Juan Soto, who I think he's like 22, 23 at this point. He's so young, it's crazy. Like, somebody like that who goes out there and, is an MVP candidate pretty much every year, and he's among the top hitters in baseball, if not the very best pure hitter in baseball, just in terms of, getting on base and, just hitting, like literally just the contact of it. Somebody like that, who's that young, like he's making, before arbitration, he's making $600,000. Like it gets to a point where you're sitting there going, really, like this is what you're going to get. And the sad thing is, the owners right now have the liberty to pay these players, these pre-arbitration eligible players, barely any money by, obviously $600,000 is a lot of money, but like in the grand scheme of how much money Major League Baseball pulls in, these players are not making much. And then control that version of their contract for 6 years and then release them into free agency when they're much, much older and their value has plummeted because their age has gone up. And now these players oftentimes don't make nearly as much money as they should. Or in the case of somebody like a Ronald Acuna Jr., sits there and goes, man, I am killing it right now. I have no idea what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I could blow out both my knees. He's already halfway there. But I could blow out both my knees and never be the same again and be a 240 hitter for the next 5 years and never make any money. So what I'm going to do is at 21 years old, I'm going to sign way below my market value just to guarantee that I have at least some semblance of money. And I forget what the exact number of his contract is, but it's something like he's making like $8 million a year, which for a guy who before his injury, I will make the bold claim that if Ronald Acuna had kept his pace in the National League last year, before he got injured, he would have won the MVP, to me. I mean, he was having an unbelievable year at the plate. And he's obviously a great defender as well, could steal bases. He could do it all. And I think he would have won MVP before that. And the MVP would have been making $8 million for the next, 10 years. Like, it's just ridiculous. And that's what these guys feel like they have to do. And, again, I think that if the players, just to kind of get, back to the actual negotiation part of this, is what scares me is that if the players give in now, if they decide, you know what, I just want to play baseball this year, and they give in to, a $10 million bonus pool, then, and all of the other the core economic stuff that the owners are trying to push to not basically cough up any extra money. If they give in, then the players will not have any power for the next 10 years, maybe 20 years, and the owners are just going to walk all over them in these negotiations for the next chunk of years until the next generation of baseball. There hasn't been a strike since 94. And in part, that's because of the stewardship of the owners and the stewardship of the MLBPA and keeping both sides cordial and friendly and everything. And it all kind of exploded this year because this generation of baseball is saying we're being underappreciated in terms of the value of how much money you guys are bringing in versus how much money we're bringing in and you guys are giving to us. And I think another key difference in these negotiations is, the players are asking for what they believe, and you can disagree or agree with what they believe their fair share is, but what they are asking for what they believe is their fair share. And they are basically making the argument, the value of the game of baseball in terms of dollars has gone up. Therefore, the value of what we make should go up in terms of dollars. It doesn't have to, we're not saying if we're making 40% or 50%, I don't know the number, but let's say it's 50-50. I don't think it is, but let's say it's 50-50. The players make 50%, the owners make 50%. let's say the players aren't saying, well, we're making 50%. We think we should be making 97% and you should be making 3. No, they're not saying that. They're saying, well, 10, 20 years ago we were making 50%, but now we're making like 40. And so we would just want to go back up to 50. Like, that's what they're saying. And the owners on the other side are going, well, we want to make more money. Okay, why? I just like it. Okay, well, no, I don't like it. Like, no, you're not, that's not a good argument. You can't just say, well, I just like money, so I'm not paying you more because I like it. Like, quite frankly, that's an argument that a 3-year-old would make. when he doesn't want to give you one of his toys or one of his clothes for you to wash. Like, well, I like this toy, so I don't want to give it to you. Well, if you don't give it to me, it's going to smell like poo for the next month. So can you just give it to me? But I like it. Oh God. Okay. Like, that, it's a dumb argument, and I can't understand why the owners are taking this stand when they should just pay the players their fair share. And again, kind of going back to the point here, if the players give in now, they're not going to have any power for the next 10, 20 years. It would be completely disastrous for them. So, personally, I'm going to give you guys an unpopular take here. If I haven't already given you an unpopular take in that, I think the players deserve more than what they're getting, that might be unpopular for some people. But what I think is that if the players and the owners get together, or the MLBPA and the MLB, I should say, their representatives get together this week, and they are just going at it all week for these negotiations, and they can't come up with anything, I think that the players should not give up the fight. I think that the players should keep on fighting until they get at least partially what they want. I'm not saying hold out until the owners give you a $115 million arbitration pool. They're never going to give you a $115 million arbitration pool. If the owners gave them that much money for the arbitration pool, I would be floored. I would fall out of this chair and I would pass out and I wouldn't wake up for days. Like, I would be shocked. Don't hold me to that, by the way. I do not want to hurt myself. But like, I'd be shocked if that happened. It would just be insane. So the unpopular part of this is that they are dealing with and have had enough of dealing with these greedy owners not coughing up any semblance of a negotiation or compromise with what the players are asking for, at least, again, in terms of the core economics. They have compromised in other areas, but in terms of the economics, they're not compromising. The economics is the most important part of this deal, and the owners are just saying no. So the players are tired of it. And I think that since they started on this path, they took a stand to this point. They can't give up that stand. They cannot give up this fight now. If they do, they will have no power, no negotiation power for the next 10 or 20 years. I've said it a couple times, but I really want to hammer that point home. Like, I'm not saying the players can't compromise. Again, I laid out, I think it was last episode, the last episode or 2 episodes ago, where I showed you guys a pretty reasonable plan, I thought anyway, with, what I thought our pre-arbitration pool should look like, and I thought $40 million was a reasonable amount of money to give. If the two sides got together and agreed on $40 million, I think the players should take that they should take that 100% of the time. They should take that right on the spot if that's what the owners end up offering. That's my opinion. I don't think that the players should hold out for $100 or $115 million for an arbitration. But I don't want that because they're never going to get that. But I do think that if the owners stick to this $10 million, $15 million that they have been offering, they can't accept that. They cannot accept that because if they do, they're not going to have any power. And what that means is, for me, again, here comes the unpopular opinion, guys. For me, if the players have to keep taking a stand and the owners are not offering what the players feel is fair and what we as fans think is fair for the players, even if it means the regular season getting delayed, and God forbid, even if it means the season getting canceled, I think that they should do it. I know, very unpopular opinion. It literally hurts me in my heart and in my gut to say, because of course I love baseball. This is the first time in my life, this will be the first season that I will be watching baseball without playing it. Like, since I was 4. Like, it's a crazy thing to me to now just be objectively a fan of baseball. And this is the first year that's going to happen. And I'm excited about it. So if there was no baseball this year, or if it got delayed, that would really stink. I would hate that. But what would be worse to me is the players playing under a deal that is going to make them miserable, and that we as fans know the owners are taking advantage of them. That's what would be worse for me. So, for the owners, I'm going to transition to talking to the owners here. And I know I said I'd keep this short, but I had to get some, a lot of stuff off of my chest here. Just cough up the money, you greedy pricks. Please. You're going to lose a lot more money if there's no baseball. Just saying. I think that if it's true that the owners kind of have this idea in their head that, the players are going to eventually give, if you believe that and you're wrong, you're going to lose a lot of money. You're going to lose a lot more money than if you put $40 million per year in an arbitration pool and present it to the players. I'll tell you that for free. If you, on average, as MLB teams, like as a whole, if you make over $1 billion a year on average, which is about what you're making on average, and every team pays $1.3 million to put into a pool to make it $40 million, I really think you're going to be okay. I think you might be able to feed your children if you do that, especially because there are very few owners in the MLB that only own baseball teams. They own other businesses, they own other products, they own other teams, even sometimes. For somebody like a Magic Johnson, like, it's crazy that, for people who are making billions per year, that a couple $1 million to pay your best employees and your employees that are making you all that money, that it's like not pulling teeth, it's like trying to turn your entire mouth into dentures and just rip the whole thing out. It's impossible. It's ridiculous. And, clearly the owners, all they care about is making every single penny that they possibly can and saving every single penny that they possibly can and keeping just an absurd amount of leverage at all times. But I genuinely think that for the players, you cannot quit. You cannot stop this fight. You have already come this far. If you give up now, you'll have no leverage whatsoever. And as always, I will keep you guys updated as this goes along. Obviously, I said I am recording this on Monday, the 21st of February, excuse me. I am just all over the place, I guess. But no, on the 21st of February, I'm recording this. This is the first day that the players and owners have met. I checked every source that I could. Social media, YouTube, ESPN, MLB. Like, I checked all this stuff, and I did not see anything that would give me an update as to how if there was any updates in terms of today's meeting specifically. So I'm presuming that either nothing happened at all or nothing important happened. And, I'm sure some of you are probably wondering, what was it exactly that the players offered last week that really, pissed off the owners to the point where they only stuck around for 15 minutes? Like, what was it that the players offered that I was talking about earlier with the compromise, right? I would like to address that question with another question. Does it matter what they offered? Is it going to change anything? No and no. Let's move on to tough talk. So this week, I had some trouble coming up with exactly what to talk about here. It's been pretty slow for sports. Obviously, you had the NBA All-Star Weekend, but like most sport All-Star Weekends, it really doesn't matter It's not even fun to watch oftentimes. I mean, the 3-point contest is okay. If the dunk contest is good, then it's obviously good. That makes sense. But, this year, this dunk contest really was kind of, it was kind of not great. In the All-Star game itself, much like the Pro Bowl is pretty useless. So, it's just basically... it's just basically Team LeBron handing the ball to Steph Curry and letting him chuck up half-court shots the whole time, and he dropped 50 points and won the MVP. So that's basically all you need to know about the game. It really wasn't... It didn't have that much that was important. So, again, I kind of had trouble figuring out what I wanted to talk about in the Tough Talk segment this week. I definitely could probably go... I went 30 minutes-ish. On the lockout, maybe a little less, but I could probably go another 30, just kind of getting all my frustration out about that. But I don't think any of you want to hear that, and I certainly don't want to do it. So I decided that this week I would start one of the 2 Tough Talk mini-series that I mentioned a little while ago. If you were here for the first podcast, you may have heard me say that sometimes for Tough Talk, I might want to redraft a specific franchise in one of the 3 major sports, or if, I wasn't really doing that, I might kind of look into the current state of certain franchises and give my take on where they should go from there. So kind of the two sides of the same coin. Going back in the past and changing it, and then predicting the future. Those were kind of the 2 things that I talked about in that episode at the very beginning. And, since this week is, again, pretty slow, obviously no baseball. The Super Bowl was a couple weeks ago. And now, obviously, NBA All-Star break, so, there's not really much to talk about in terms of basketball even. I decided that this week I am going to use it as a good a time as any to start redrafting a franchise and start that mini-series. So that's what I'll be doing this week. So strap in. It's going to be fun. I'm very excited about this. It's going to be a lot more positive and a lot happier than the first part of this episode. But the team that I am going to be redrafting this week is going to be the Dave Gettleman era New York Football Giants. And that era spans from 2018 to 2021, so last year's draft. However, I am not going to address last year's draft. I am only going to do 2018, 2019, and 2020. And the reason is because, it's very easy to look at now and see some guys that were obvious, right? Like a guy like Jamar Chase, right? Obviously, he might be the best player in the entire draft up to this point, but the Giants didn't have a pick before that, so, what could they have done? They might have been able to trade up for him, but, that's never a given. So, I want to give a little more time to evaluate not just the Giants' rookies last year, but also, all the other teams' rookies. You never know. Trevor Lawrence, if you're going to look at 1 year, Trevor Lawrence is one of the worst number 1 overall pick quarterbacks in history. He played terrible last year, but does anybody really think he's a bad quarterback? Does anybody think that the Jaguars should have taken anybody else other than Trevor Lawrence? Of course not. He's a fantastic quarterback, and he's going to figure it out. He just had a pretty raunchy team around him and a really awful coaching staff, and then coaching changes in the middle of the year, and it was just a mess. Nobody blames Trevor Lawrence for that. So, I'm going to do 2018, 2019, and 2020. And again, the reason being because since we're only a year removed, I want to give it a little bit more time. Give it, meaning, the rookies in the 2021 draft, give them a little bit more time to kind of prove how good they are, because, there are guys that get drafted and they are not great for a couple of years. They don't really reach a lot of, their potential for a couple of years, or they have to move to a new team to really reach their potential. So, I want to give that a little bit more time, so I'm not going to touch the 2021 draft. I am not the first person to do this, and since Dave Gettleman is now retired. I think he got fired. Retired. I probably will not be the last person to do a redraft of the Dave Gettleman era New York Giants. But I originally saw Strong Opinion Sports do this kind of concept a few months ago, and I just wanted to give him a shout out, and I will put the link to the video, to his video redrafting the Dave Gettleman era Giants in the description of this video, because first of all, he is a fantastic YouTuber. You know, he honestly, I'm gonna be fully upfront with you guys. He is one of my main inspirations of actually starting my own podcast, because he just seems to me like he was, you know, just a normal guy. You know, he loved sports. He wasn't a pro athlete or anything like that. I think he played football in college, but you know, he just seemed like he was a normal guy with a dream and loved sports, and that's kind of what I am. I mean, I'm just a normal guy who loves sports, and I wanted to talk about it online. Like, that's basically, you know, I see a lot of similarities there, and so he was a real inspiration to me to start my own YouTube channel. And so, again, I will link his video doing a redraft of the Giants in the description. He does a lot of great stuff, so feel free to go check him out as well. He's really started blowing up the last couple of years, so it's super cool to see that, and, you know, I will help where I can. But, you know, a few ground rules before I actually get to the specific draft and the specific team that I'm going to be having. Before we start here, so this will only be day 1 and day 2 draft picks, which means your first round, your second round, and your third round draft picks. That is what I will be covering for multiple reasons. One, because if I were to do the entirety of all 3 years of a draft, I would be here for another 2.5 hours, and I do not want to do that, and I don't think you want me to do that either. And the second being because, you know, honestly, you know, once you get to the 4th round and on, you're not really expecting those players to really be game changers and franchise changers at that point. Your franchise is not going to fold because of the fact that your 4th round defensive tackle didn't pan out and become a Pro Bowler. Like, that's never going to happen. The second rule that I'm going to implement here is that I can, at liberty, trade up or trade down in the draft, depending on, you know, the circumstances that I foresee here. But the catch is the situation has to make sense for both teams at the time that the trade would be happening, or else I'm not going to do the trade. So, you know, I can't just say, oh, I like the Patriots, so I'm going to trade the Giants' first-round pick to the Patriots. Well, why would I trade the first-round pick to the Patriots? Were they going all in at the time that this was happening? Did they need a specific player at that position at the time? No, I just think that it would be nice for the Patriots to have this player because I like him, and I like the Patriots. No, we're not going to be doing that. I can trade up and trade down, but it has to be reasonable, and it has to make sense for not only the Giants, but for the other team I am trading for as well. And when I do trade in this video, I will kind of do a little bit of explanation as to why I think it would make sense, not only for the Giants, but also for the other team involved in the trade. Rule number 3. I can also refuse to sign free agents that the Giants signed in real life if the situation no longer makes sense after the draft. So let's say, you know, let's say I was doing the Patriots, just to give an example. And, you know, 2 years ago, I traded up in the draft to draft Justin Herbert. Obviously, I'm not going to draft Mac Jones in the 2021 draft or something like that because I don't need a quarterback anymore. Or let's say, you know, I decided to re-sign Stephon Gilmore, you know, in the last offseason if I was, again, doing the Patriots. Well, this past season, the Patriots signed Jalen Mills for another defensive back for a pretty hefty contract. I do not believe the Patriots would have done that had they had kept Stephon Gilmore at a reasonable price. So in that instance, I would refuse to sign Jalen Mills. He would not be on the Patriots in that universe. Same logic will apply here. If I draft somebody at a position that I know is going to start and I know is going to play a big role, or I know at least fills a need for the franchise, but that past offseason, the Giants also, or the next offseason, whatever the case may be, signed that, another player at that position to fill that hole, I can refuse to sign that player. And I will explain all of that as it goes along, and as this redraft kind of takes shape. I will be kind of telling you when I'm doing that. So, if for those of you who have knowledge of the Giants roster at the time, you'll kind of be able to follow along and be able to put the pieces together in your head, just like I am doing. And also, I will not be trading away players just willy-nilly. So I can trade players during the draft. So like if I'm trying to trade up or trade down, and I think that a player fits a need for a specific team. I don't believe that this actually happens in this particular redraft, but I'm also kind of explaining these rules for future redraft things. Although I will kind of do like a basic rundown for every video, obviously. But let's say I do try and trade a player. It has to be during the draft, and it has to be for draft picks. I can't just say Nate Solder was traded at the 2020 trade deadline just because. Like, I can't do that. That's not really realistic or fair for the redraft, so I'm not going to be doing that. But I can trade players during the draft. So I wanted to make that clear as well. Hopefully those rules made sense, and hopefully to you guys they're pretty fair. I will say, another kind of rule. I don't know if it's, I think this is a rule, but I think it's just more of common sense, right? So while I do believe that the moves that I will make the Giants better, I will not be changing the draft order from what it was in real life. I don't think that I can change the draft order in real life. That would take a lot of re-simming, how many wins, Pythagorean wins and stuff like that, some analytical stuff thought that the Giants would win with all these new players. Like, it would just be ridiculous, and I'd have to re-sim whole seasons for every team, and it just wouldn't make sense. So, in order to keep it simple, I will be keeping the same draft order that was in real life. Now, some people might not like that because obviously the Giants weren't very good the last few years, so they have some pretty high picks. However, I hope that I can make up for it in the fact that I will let you guys know I am drafting guys oftentimes that were taken a little bit later. 5, 10, maybe even more picks after the Giants actually end up picking in real life. So, I might pick a guy at 2 that was originally drafted at 18 or something like that, which obviously, that's not the most realistic thing in the world either, but I don't think they're quite that, I don't think it's quite that expansive, but you guys get my point, right? With the, I can't change the draft pick, but, let's say the Giants were so good they drafted at 18 anyway, maybe they would have drafted that player anyway. So I think that there's kind of a balance there that I'm trying to hit, but I hope that those rules are fair. So, and those are the ground rules for the video. And with that, let's hop into the 2018 NFL Draft. This was the first Dave Gettleman-led draft for the Giants. So, again, this is the one where it all got started. The Giants were trying to set a hard rebuild, or at least that's what they claimed to be doing. But what they did instead was they made a move that said, we are going all in by selecting running back Saquon Barkley out of Penn State at number 2 overall. This one's going to be pretty straightforward. Don't do that. Listen, Saquon's a fantastic player. Obviously, injuries are never great for a person's career, but Saquon is absolutely electric. He's a great receiver out of the backfield, too. If he stays healthy, he's a top 3 running back in the NFL, bar none. Definitely top 5 if you want to argue top 3. I understand there's some pretty talented running backs in the NFL right now. But either way, top of the list would be Saquon Barkley in terms of talent at the running back position. But I am one of those people that just believe that you should not draft a running back that high, ever. There's always going to be value at that position later in the draft. So you really should not take a running back at number 2. If you do need a running back, and that is your number 1 need going into a draft, and you are picking that highly, then you should either take somebody that's of a lesser need, but that's a really, really good player, or you should trade down in order to get a running back later on. That's just the way I think you should go about that. And I know that some people may disagree with that, but I just believe you should never take a running back that high in the NFL unless you are a contending team and you decide to trade up to that high to get that one particular player because you feel like that running back, a Saquon Barkley, is the missing piece to your team, and now you're going to go win a Super Bowl. If that's you, I guess I understand it, but I also probably wouldn't do that either because you're giving up now not only the number 2 pick in this instance, but you'd be giving up probably another first-round pick, maybe even 2, and then some other picks just to take a running back who, might blow out his knee and never be the same again, and now you've wasted all those draft picks. Think of Ricky Williams way back when. I think it was 1999, 2000, something like that, where the Saints traded every single one of their draft picks for Ricky Williams, and Ricky Williams was a fine running back. He had a nice career. Was not worth that many picks, though. So anyways, getting back to it, so this is a pretty easy swap for me. Eli Manning, obviously getting much older. He's in the twilight of his career. But I know that Dave Gettleman wanted to stick with Eli for at least one more season at that time. So I think that I'm going to use this pick in order to protect Eli Manning much, much better than the Giants offensive line did that year. And I am going to select guard Quentin Nelson out of Notre Dame, who was originally picked at number 5. I don't really think I need to, explain too much as to why I chose Quentin Nelson here. Obviously, he is the best guard in football right now. He has really turned himself into an absolutely punishing offensive lineman. And to really kind of anchor that offensive line in New York, there is nobody better than Quentin Nelson for sure. So that would be my second pick in the draft there. And by second pick, I do mean literally the number 2 overall pick, not the second round pick. So now, after what I feel like is pretty much a no-brainer there, moving on to the second round of the 2018 draft. In the second round, the New York Giants took guard Will Hernandez out of UTEP at number 34 overall. I think the Giants, maybe they had the right idea here. They wanted to go running back and then offensive line. I think that they should have gone offensive line first and then maybe take your weapons later. But, to who's his own, I see the logic here. It just didn't pan out. Will Hernandez just really didn't end up panning out. So, also, since we already took a guard in the first round, and a very, very good one, by the way, the best, probably, other than maybe Zach Martin, in the NFL right now, I don't see any reason to double up here in the second round, especially with the guys that are available here. So, since we did already take a guard at number 2, I am going to draft linebacker Darius Leonard out of South Carolina State, who originally went at number 36 to the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, I feel like there's another guy. I mean, what a job the Colts did in this draft, by the way, taking, the first 2 picks were arguably their 2 best players, their captain on offense and their captain on defense. I mean, unbelievable draft for the Colts, by the way, so congrats to you. But I'm kind of stealing your thunder here. At this point, the Giants had B.J. Goodson at the Mike linebacker position for a lot of their season, most of it, in fact. So Darius Leonard would just slide in and take over that spot. Nothing against B.J. Goodson, but he's just no Darius Leonard, and I don't think it's really an argument there. We obviously know how great of a player Darius Leonard has become. He's one of the best all-around playmaking linebackers in the NFL, is getting interceptions and sacks and leading, the Colts and sometimes in the NFL in tackles pretty much every year. And, pairing him with another playmaking linebacker in an Alex Ogletree is absolutely fantastic. But also, it'll be easier to let Alex Ogletree go once his contract expires after the 2019-2020 season because now we do have Darius Leonard. So, that will be the next pick. And then now, next with the 66th pick in the 2018 draft, the New York Giants took linebacker Lorenzo Carter out of Georgia. I feel bad for the Giants on this one. There are a lot of great linebackers at this spot in the draft that ended up really panning out, and I Lorenzo Carter is probably one of the very few that really didn't. So I feel like the Giants probably said, take our pick of the litter, whichever one you like best, and they just happened to pick the wrong guy. But again, same situation as before, since we already picked what Lorenzo Carter would end up becoming in the second round of this draft by taking Darius Leonard. There's no reason to take Lorenzo Carter here again. So instead, I am going to use this pick to take safety Justin Reed out of Stanford, and he originally was drafted 2 picks later at 68. Now, like I said, there are a lot of linebackers in this draft that they could have gone with. I mean, guys, it was so tempting to just take Fred Warner, who is one of the best linebackers in football. I honestly would make the argument Darius Leonard is 1, Fred Warner is 2. You might even say Fred Warner is 1, Darius Leonard is 2. I mean, you're talking about, I personally believe, the 2 best linebackers in football, at least in terms of inside linebackers, right? Obviously, an outside linebacker like a TJ Watt or somebody like that, whole different ballgame. But in terms of Mike linebackers, inside linebackers, your Mikes, Darius Leonard, Fred Warner, I think they're the 2 best in football. So it would have been very, 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 very tempting at this point with Fred Warner being available to take him and just have the most ridiculously unfair linebacker duo in history probably. But I'm going to control myself. And I'm going to address another need that this team had to fill. And that is, again, safety Justin Reed. Fantastic young player. Hasn't made a Pro Bowl yet, but I still think he's probably one of the better young safeties in the game. Nothing crazy here. Obviously, a third-round pick to get that much value out of a guy is pretty good. And also partnering him with Landon Collins, who went to the Pro Bowl. I think people forget how good Landon Collins was at one point for the Giants. He went to the Pro Bowl in 2018. So right before this draft, he went to the Pro Bowl. And so pairing him and Justin Reed in the back, in the secondary for the Giants, that's going to be really, really great. And you know what? If they don't mesh, then after this next season, Landon Collins left for, I think, Washington in free agency. I know he left in free agency. I just can't remember where exactly, but I think it was Washington. He leaves in free agency. They let him walk. So, if you feel like, the partnership between Collins and Reed doesn't mesh, or, they do have very similar skill sets. So if you feel like you don't necessarily need Landon Collins, you can trade him, or you can let him walk in free agency. I am going to try and keep this video as realistic as I can. I can't just say, I can't just be a Madden general manager right now and say, oh, well, I don't need Landon Collins. I'm just going to trade him for a first-round pick or something because he has high value. I'm not going to do that. If they're going to let him walk in free agency in real life, then he'll walk in free agency in real life. But they could re-sign Landon Collins if they wanted to, but I think in this instance, I'm going to assume that they are still going to let Landon Collins walk because they let him walk without his replacement. So I don't really think that they would have him stay with a guy who could possibly replace him. But either way, let's move on to the 69th pick, where the Giants took defensive tackle B.J. Hill, who is a good player. He's had a nice career, but, I don't think he really, I don't think it's as big of a need as what the Giants need at this point. They already had Damon Harrison and Dalvin Tomlinson at defensive tackle at the time that they took him, so I really don't think that it made much value sense. I know he was a good player and ended up being a good pick. Don't get me wrong. This is one of the picks I actually like that Dave Gettleman had. But I think for this instant, there is somebody that is better, that fits a need for the Giants right now. So instead of taking B.J. Hill at number 69, I am going to take offensive tackle Orlando Brown Jr. out of Oklahoma, who originally went 83rd in the draft. I know that's a bit of a reach, but it's Orlando Brown, and the offensive line for the Giants was so bad. They still are, honestly, so bad. Now with Quentin Nelson and Orlando Brown, one of the best young tackles in the league right now, and also, again, either number 1 or number 2 best guards in football right now, I think that really having those two guys there solidifies the offensive line. Wide receiver Michael Gallup was also an option here, but I think with Odell and Sterling Shepard still there, even with, Odell kind of starting to get fed up with things, plus Evan Ingram, your tight end, being there, I think that Michael Gallup, that wide receiver needs not necessarily as big as it will be in years to come. So I think now your offensive line is getting settled. You've got some talent there now. Eli Manning now has at least a better chance back there than he did in real life. And I know, no running back right now. But I think the Giants have some pretty decent running backs back there, for this year that they could at least, piece things together for a year. And plus, if you say you're going to rebuild. If you don't have a great running game, you're bad. That's fine. You might get a better draft pick in this next year's draft. So I think that, building through the trenches right now is way more important than drafting a running back. So now, that is it for 2018. So hopefully you guys liked the 2018 version of the draft. So now we're going to move on to the 2019 draft. And, this is the one that went just terribly wrong for the Giants. This is where, just after a season, everybody was calling for Dave Gettleman's head on a pike. I mean, it was just such a bad draft for Dave Gettleman and the Giants. They had 3 first-round picks, and honestly, they kind of blew all 3 of them. They just were not good picks. Some of the players were okay, but just for the value of what they got out of these picks, just horrendous, honestly, just horrendous. So here I am, Superman, stepping in to save the day here. But before I do that, I do have to address some kind of off-season moves. Like I promised at the beginning of this segment, I will kind of explain when I decide to sign guys or not sign guys, trade guys, whatever the case may be. So here I am. I will address, in this alternate redrafted universe, Odell Beckham Jr. will still be traded to the Cleveland Browns. I don't think the team doing slightly better or slightly worse is really going to help. I just don't think that it's going to help this kind of deal that OBJ just wanted out of there. I don't think it's going to solve it, so OBJ will still get traded for the package of guard Kevin Zeitler and Jabril Peppers, the safety, Jabril Peppers, excuse me. I do, for my non-football people, I am trying to kind of give positions so that you guys can more easily follow along. So you can add both Zeitler and Peppers to the team before this draft. So now your offensive line is really good. Kevin Zeitler was a Pro Bowler at that point. So now you've got both guard spots really filled in. You've got, Orlando Brown at your right at your right tackle position. You've got a guy that you just signed to a big contract in Nate Solder at your left tackle, which, didn't end up working out for them, but, still, you have a big time free agent signing at your tackle spot. You still got to work on center, but we will get to that. Obviously, that trade still goes through, and then also the Giants do still sign wide receiver Golden Tate and defensive end Leonard Williams, because I do still think, especially with Odell Beckham Jr. leaving, Golden Tate still makes sense for the team to bring in. I don't know if it really made a lot of sense. I think it was kind of a weird move. But, the Giants made it in real life, so I'll include it here, even if I might not necessarily agree with it in real life. And then, obviously, defensive end Leonard Williams. I do still think that still makes sense as a signing, especially since it was such a short-term signing. I think it was only 2 years to kind of bring him in at first. But what they do not do is they do not sign safety Antoine Bethea. I know it's a little bit of a minor move, and quite honestly, even if you know a lot about football, I'd be very impressed if you knew that Antoine Bethea was on the Giants that year, because I did not remember that Antoine Bethea was on the Giants that year. But you know what? If you're watching this and you're a Giants fan, maybe you did remember that, and congrats to you. But I certainly didn't. But I think with Jabril Peppers and with Justin Reed back there, I don't think the need for Antoine Bethea is there. So I'm going to save a little bit of money there and not bring him in. And one last thing, in this world, the Giants did not use their 2018 supplemental draft pick to take some, I don't even remember his name, going to be honest with you, some defensive back that never turned out to be anything Like, I don't remember who it was. It doesn't really matter. So in this draft, so the way the supplemental draft works for those who do not know is that after the draft, I don't remember how much time goes by, but after the draft, there's what's called a supplemental draft for guys that may not have been eligible at the time of the draft, but they are now eligible for the draft. And if you use a supplemental draft pick, then you are giving up that round of a pick in the next draft. So the Giants, in this instance, used a third round selection in this supplemental draft to get whatever the defensive back's name was. Sorry. But in this world, with hindsight, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to draft that guy. So in the 2019 draft, they will have an additional third round pick that they would have had they not used it for the compensatory pick. So they're going to have an extra third round pick that they did not have in real life, which I think is super fun because now I just get to use my imagination as to what I think is going to happen. So, all right. So they're going to have the, by the way, the pick will be 71st overall. That's going to be the one that the Giants now have. So they're going to have an additional third. Anyway, okay. So with the with the sixth pick in the 2019 NFL draft, the New York Football Giants took quarterback Daniel Jones out of Duke. Their next franchise guy, and I'm not going to change that. You know, I think this is one of the best picks that they've made. I'm a huge fan of Daniel Jones, and, you know, honestly, I think that he has the potential to be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. No, it was actually one of the worst draft picks I've ever seen in my entire life. Yeah, it was terrible. Oh, it was so bad. Okay, no. So instead of Daniel Jones, because I would probably draft a McDonald's bag instead of Daniel Jones at this point, I am going to instead be selecting defensive end Brian Burns out of Florida State, who originally went number 16. So this is one of those instances where, again, if you think that the Giants wouldn't have drafted at number 6 because of their team being a little better, I'm drafting a guy that was 10 picks later. So hopefully that balances itself out. But anyways, yeah, I absolutely love Brian Burns. And for those of you who remember this draft, a lot of people wanted the Giants to draft linebacker Josh Allen, who is a great player, don't get me wrong, but I love Brian Burns much better, and I think that he fits a little bit better in the scheme of the Giants defense than Josh Allen does. Josh Allen is an outside linebacker that's mostly a pass rusher, and the Giants kind of, their 3-4 defense is more primy to, a little bit more coverage linebackers, which Josh Allen is not necessarily that kind of archetype of a coverage linebacker. So I think that, Brian Burns, a down lineman who can rush the passer, makes much more sense for the Giants here. Again, I absolutely love Brian Burns. He's one of the best young pass rushers in the NFL. And, I'm hoping that this is going to prompt the Giants to not re-sign Leonard Williams to a huge contract because he's not your only pass rusher anymore. And I think that they felt at the time that Leonard Williams re-signed after the 2020 season. I think that, they probably just felt like he was their only option. But obviously I'm not going to get to that part of the video. I'm not going to go all the way past the 2020 season. It's just kind of fantasy land. So anyways, clearly you guys can see that I'm building up the trenches for the Giants, as I mentioned before. I'm building up their offensive line. Now I'm building up their defensive line. I'm building up. You obviously, again, already have guys like Dalvin Tomlinson and Damon Harrison. Now you've got Leonard Williams. Now you've got Brian Burns as pass rushers. So certainly I am building through the trenches here, and I think that the reason I'm doing that is because it's the only way that they're going to compete in the NFC at this point. There are a lot of really, really good teams in the NFC, but all that being said, now it's time for some fun, and I am honestly hoping that at least, this is all kind of made up, this is all fantasy stuff, and this is all probably a little unrealistic, and that's fine. But what I'm at least hoping that these next few picks show you is just how much the Giants blew it. How much talent was on the board that the Giants left there versus what they ended up getting. That's at least the lesson that I hope to teach you guys here. So, here's to Dave Gettleman completely blowing this draft. With the 17th pick in the draft, so one pick after Brian Burns originally went, by the way, the Giants selected defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence out of Clemson, who is, a decent player. He's a pretty good player, but I honestly have hopes he could still be really good. But now, with Brian Burns, Dalvin Tomlinson, Leonard Williams, all these guys, I don't think that is a need, especially after going defensive end with your first pick in this draft. I don't think that he is a good fit here. And there are a few different ways I could have gone with this pick, a few different ways that I did want to go. I spent a long time kind of planning this and thinking through this pick specifically. But I decided that it was time for this offense to get a little bit more electric, and I'm going to go with running back, Josh Jacobs out of Alabama, who originally went 24th overall in this draft. And, again, usually I'm not super keen on drafting running back super high, and 17 is a bit high, but obviously, a guy that has been as good as Josh Jacobs has been over the last few years, I am making an exception here for that. I could have gone with defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons, who was a Pro Bowler this year, one of the best young defensive tackles in the league. He's really, really good. I could have gone with that, but obviously, I kind of talked myself out of it earlier while saying that, a guy like Dexter Lawrence really didn't fit. Obviously, Simmons is a bit better than Lawrence, but it would have been tempting, but I decided against it because, again, not the best fit. I also could have gone with wide receivers, Marquise Hollywood Brown. I could have gone with him, who's another young wideout for the Baltimore Ravens, who's starting to come into his own a little bit. I could have gone with a very, very, very talented pass-catching tight end, Noah Fant, who plays for the Denver Broncos. Both of those guys were available, I could have gotten Eli some weapons in possibly his last year in the NFL. But instead, I decided to go with the Pro Bowl caliber running back that they did not get by not drafting Saquon in this redraft. So I decided to do that so that Eli doesn't have to rely on his arm as much in this year, and especially since the offensive line is now really starting to solidify itself with Orlando Brown, with Quentin Nelson, with Nate Solder, and with Kevin Zeitler, obviously. So they're really starting to pull it together on that offensive line. But don't you worry, because I am going to go get Eli some weapons right now. So with the 30th pick in the draft, the New York Giants took defensive back DeAndre Baker out of Georgia. Going to keep this one short. He played awful, got arrested, did a bunch of stupid stuff, and got cut, all within a year. So, yeah, safe to say that was a bust there. I do think he's still playing for somebody in the NFL. I don't know where right now, and I don't really care to know because I'm not the biggest fan of his, as you can tell. This is where, I decided we're going to have the first trade of the draft, and I'm going to put that trade on the visual as a visual reference here. Here's what I believe is going to happen here. So in this scenario, I don't think this is really all that unrealistic considering what the Arizona Cardinals did in this draft and in future drafts. So I think that the Arizona Cardinals have their eye on a weapon for their newly minted first overall pick in this draft, Kyler Murray, their new quarterback. And I think that they are afraid that the New York Giants are going to take him at number 30, which, you know what? If the Giants stayed here, they may very well have taken him at 30 in this universe. But instead, the Arizona Cardinals offer their 62nd pick and the 65th pick. So two really high picks there to move up to number 30 to take wide receiver Deebo Samuel, who, this past year, and especially in the playoffs, showed exactly how valuable he is. He's one of the, up-and-coming wide receivers in the game. So certainly the Cardinals would love to have him on their team right now to kind of take a lot of pressure off. Again, their newly minted first overall pick in this universe, quarterback Kyler Murray. So I think it makes sense for the Cardinals to want to move up and do that, feeling like they had a shot to really go get him. So now, here's what it means for this redraft for the Giants. The Giants now have the 62nd pick, the 65th pick, the 71st pick, and the 95th pick in this draft. So that means you and I, guys, we're going to have some fun here with this one. And I'm going to try and kind of fly through this just a little bit because I don't want to take up a ton of time with this. So, with the 62nd pick in the 2019 NFL Draft, the Giants select wide receiver DK Metcalf out of Ole Miss. With the 65th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft, the Giants will select wide receiver Terry McLaurin out of Ohio State. With the 71st pick, which again was the pick that they got by not going into the supplemental draft, the 71st pick, the Giants will select tight end Dawson Knox out of Ole Miss. And with the 95th pick, the Giants will not be taking O'Shane Ximines like they did earlier. I believe he's a defensive end. Sorry, I did forget to mention that. He is from Old Dominion. They're not going to take him like they did in real life because, again, they do not need it. Instead, they are going to take defensive end Max Crosby out of Eastern Michigan. Wow. I mean, yeah, this is crazy. It makes no sense. How in the world would the Giants be able to pull this off? They wouldn't. That's how. There's no way that they do this without hindsight. It is completely crazy, but this is fantasy booking. Like I said, at the very least, I hope this teaches you how much talent the Giants left on the board, man. Like, it's a crazy amount of talent in this draft that the Giants just squandered, and it's really, really sad. And, but I do think what's crazy is I think you and I can still see the logic here. This was a possible thing. The Giants could have sat there at number 30 and went, you know what? We've taken 2 first-round picks already. Let's build more. Let's get more draft picks out of this. We don't need a guy at the back end of the first round. Let's trade back. Let's get some more talent. And in this redraft, they're really, really low on wide receivers. So let's take a couple of wide receivers with these 2 picks. I think that honestly is not that crazy to think. Now, maybe, drafting Max Crosby instead of O'Shane Ximines, fair enough, that's probably a bit of a leap. But you know what? Again, it's fantasy booking, and that's what I wanted to do. So, and on the player side, need I say more? DK Metcalf, Scary Terry McLaurin, Dawson Knox, who really came into his own this past season, so maybe he's one of those guys who's a bit of a late bloomer. But still, I mean, it's okay that he's a late bloomer because guess what? You got Evan Ingram in front of him already. So it's fine if he's a late bloomer. So, and then obviously, another great, possibly even elite pass rusher. Another guy who's a bit of a late bloomer. But man, let me tell you, this is going to be a scary defense by the end. And you're going to see the full scope of the team at the end of this. But I'm already getting excited. I'm already getting excited. So now that's the end of the 2019 draft. So now we're moving on to the 2020 NFL draft. And I know what you're thinking. Lopes, this is all great. This seems like it's a great team, but, who cares if there's no quarterback to throw the ball? The reason why the Giants took Daniel Jones at number 6, as weird as it was because they really needed a quarterback because Eli Manning was getting old and he was probably going to retire. You're right. But I think, here's what I think. Maybe an unpopular opinion, maybe it's not. I think among Giants fans it's probably not an unpopular opinion, especially given where Daniel Jones is in his career right now. But I think that Eli Manning deserved to finish out his last year. He wasn't the best quarterback in the world most of the time, unless he was playing the Patriots, and then he was the best quarterback of all time. But most of the time, wasn't phenomenal. He especially in his later years, threw a lot of interceptions. It wasn't great. But I believe, if my memory serves me correct, he was benched halfway through, or maybe not even, halfway through the 2019-2020 season. And, he had a starting streak, a consecutive start streak that was like 200 plus, and they just benched him. Like, no, you don't do that. I don't care how bad he's playing. I don't care how old he is. This is his last year. Let the man play. That's the way I look at it. I understand, maybe you still want a young quarterback that Eli Manning can tutor for a year. I get it. But I promise it will make more sense when this draft is over. So, hopping in with the 4th pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, the Giants originally selected tackle Andrew Thomas out of Georgia. So now, I could still see the need here. I could still see the need. You do, with Nate Solder underperforming in real life, I'm going to presume he's going to underperform in this redraft because, I'm not just going to say, all of a sudden, Nate Solder's a Pro Bowler. No. I could still see the fit. You may still need to replace him at left tackle. But, obviously, your biggest need is quarterback. Your biggest need is quarterback right now if you're the Giants. So, and, also with Orlando Brown, you do have another great tackle on the other side. So, it's not as big of a need as it otherwise would have been. But, again, like I said, quarterback is your number one need. There's an obvious pick. It's staring me right in the face. I need a quarterback that I know is going to jump right in and be absolutely phenomenal, and there is one available. Easy. Not even close. I am taking, with the number 4 pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, I am taking quarterback Justin Herbert out of Oregon, and he's going to be the new face of the franchise. He's going to start day 1, and he's going to be fantastic. Now, in real life, he did not technically start day 1. I think he started week 2 or 3 because Tyrod Taylor and accidentally getting an injection and puncturing his lung and stuff like that. So he didn't start week 1, but he might as well have started week 1, and quite frankly, it was over. As soon as he went in, you knew that nobody was taking that job. You knew he was going to be a franchise guy. So I'm presuming that in this reality, he may have some growing pains a little bit because he's starting week 1, but he's Justin Herbert. I think it still makes sense here to take him. He's going to start right away. He's going to be awesome. And now you think about the weapons that the Giants have in that offense. It is a lot like the Chargers offense when Justin Herbert took over. A pretty good tight end, some really good wide receivers, and a good running back. So, you got, and a good offensive line too. So, you've got guys that it makes sense. The pieces are going to fit around Herbert very well. I think it's going to make sense, and I think Justin Herbert is going to be awesome like he was in real life for the Giants, and much better than Daniel Jones, too. Much, much better than Daniel Jones, yeah. So moving on to the 36th pick, where the Giants originally selected safety Xavier McKinney out of Alabama. I am a big fan of Xavier McKinney. I think he's going to be very, very good if he can stay on the field and stay healthy. But I am actually going to swing my second trade of the video here. So we will not have the opportunity to draft Xavier McKinney. And this time, Seattle comes a-calling. The Seahawks pick up the phone, and they see that a certain running back who was projected to go in the first round is slipping. He's past the second round, and they're sitting there thinking, I want Russell Wilson to be happy. I want to take some pressure off of my fantastic quarterback here, and I see that this running back is slipping. So what they're going to do is they are going to trade their 48th pick, their 69th pick, and a 7th round draft pick to the, obviously, New York Football Giants in order to move up to 36 to take running back Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor, you may know, is the running back for the Indianapolis Colts, who ran all over the NFL this year. And unpopular opinion, 12 weeks through the season, if I had a vote, I would have voted for Jonathan Taylor to be the MVP of the NFL. That's just me. But obviously, he's a fantastic running back. He'll really, really do well in Seattle. So that's why Seattle makes the trade. I think it makes perfect sense. But as for the Giants, they are going to use the 48th pick in the draft that was just given to them by the Seattle Seahawks to draft defensive back Trayvon Diggs out of Alabama, who originally went at pick 51. So now the Giants really solidify their top 2 corner spots for that defense. Obviously, you got James Bradbury, who's there in real life, who they signed in real life, who ended up becoming a Pro Bowler. And now you've got Trayvon Diggs, who is, along with J.C. Jackson, probably the best ball-hawking defensive back in the NFL. And those number 2 corners are really the guys that are the ball hawks. You know, your number 1 guy for your defensive backs, you want him to be kind of a shutdown corner, right? You want him to be the guy they don't even throw the ball to. And that number 2 guy is the guy that's going to get the ball thrown at him all the time, so he's got to be the one that's really the ball hawk. That's why J.C. Jackson, obviously this year he proved himself to be a ball hawk and a number 1 corner, which is very rare. But now, you know, he was so successful originally because they had Stephon Gilmore on the other side, they wouldn't even throw the ball over there. So they were just throwing at J.C. Jackson all day, and he was just getting pick after pick after pick after pick. That's just kind of how it goes. That's a formula, and that's the formula I'm implementing here. I'm hoping that they don't throw at James Bradbury very often, and Trayvon Diggs is going to be just as successful in New York as he was in Dallas. So that's the 48th pick, and and now with the 69th pick, the Giants are going to take guard Jonah Jackson out of the Ohio State University, who was originally drafted at number 75. Really put some more beef on that already pretty good offensive line. And in this universe, I would move Kevin Zeitler to center. I think that he's got the size, and I think that he's got the, you know, veteran leadership and the ability to run an offense. So I think moving him to center would probably be a good transition there. So I would say that is a pretty darn good draft right there. And I think that's a pretty good redrafting right there. So now I want to just kind of show you guys the full scope. I want to show you the full team. This is what the 2021 squad would look like. Or the 2020-2021 squad would look like, I should say, going into the year in terms of your starters and then a couple of main reserve players that I think deserve to be shouted out here. You've obviously got your quarterback, Justin Herbert. You got your running back, Josh Jacobs, and then Devontae Freeman, who they signed in real life. You drafted now your wide receivers, DK Metcalf and scary Terry McLaurin, and then obviously Sterling Shepard there in real life. Fantastic number 3 wide receiver for them, I think, if they can keep him around. Tight ends, you have Dawson Knox and Evan Ingram, although I am assuming that they are going to re-sign Evan Ingram after this season. They might not, and if not, then fine. You just have Dawson Knox, who's still a very good replacement for Evan Ingram. Nate Solder is still, at this point in the redraft, I did not address left tackle, so he is still technically your offensive lineman, but I would say, or your left tackle, but I would say put literally anybody else there, make a signing, draft a guy in the 5th round and replace him. Anything, I don't care. But as of right now, he is the starting left tackle, unless, barring, somebody getting drafted in later rounds. Quentin Nelson at left guard. Kevin Zeitler, as I said, will move to center. Jonah Jackson will slide in as a rookie and play right guard. And Orlando Brown Jr. at right tackle. Your defense now. Oh boy, this is just fun. Defensive end Brian Burns, nose tackle Leonard Williams, defensive end Max Crosby. That's just, man, that pass rush. Oh goodness, it's going to be just unstoppable, that pass rush. And then obviously, you got guys rotating in that can help stop the run and everything like that. So it's just going to be gross. And then your back 7 now. So right now, Kyler Fackrell is still the right outside linebacker. He's projected to be the right outside linebacker here. I think that this is a spot where, you can sign a big free agent, or, you can draft somebody, whatever the case may be. I think this is a spot where you can really get a guy that's going to be really good in this spot. But I obviously, in my redraft, did not address that. So Kyler Fackrell right now, based on what happened in real life, would still be projected to be the starting right outside linebacker. And then at left outside linebacker, Marcus Golden, who was on the team in real life. He's an interesting player. Sometimes he has 10 or 11 sacks in a year, and sometimes he has like 1. And I just don't think that the Giants are the best fit for him, which is obvious because he went back to Arizona, which is a much better fit for him. But I do think that at this point he would still be the starting left outside linebacker for them. And I think that in 2019, so the year before this, he got 11 sacks. So I feel like it definitely would be justified to start him at the left outside linebacker position. Middle linebacker, Blake Martinez, who they signed in real life and led the NFL in tackles, I believe, or at least was up there in the 2020 season. So he would be there. And then obviously Darius Leonard. That's a very, very good linebacker duo right there. Your secondary now is James Bradbury, Trayvon Diggs, and then your slot corner can be either big play Darnay Holmes or Isaac Yiadom, whichever guy kind of, figures it out in training camp and ends up winning that. That's who I'm projecting to be there. I think in real life they both played a similar amount of time. So, one of those two guys is probably going to be your starting slot corner again, or maybe you could make a signing, whatever the case may be. And then your safeties are Jabril Peppers and Justin Reed. I don't know about you guys, but that looks like a pretty stacked squad to me. I mean, and you know what? I didn't solve all of their problems. As you can see, I didn't really address left tackle. I didn't address either of the outside linebacker spots, really, and I didn't address your slot cornerback spot. There's definitely still holes on the team, but I would argue there's holes on every team, first of all, but it is definitely still a lot more manageable than what you have in real life for the Giants. I mean, woof. You could definitely, come 2020, come before, once you get to this season, you're ready to take a step up into contention. You're ready to compete for the playoffs with all this talent on both sides of the ball. You are ready to compete for your division with Dallas, who, again, is another really, really good team. And, you might be able to make some big moves in free agency because you have a lot less big contracts on your books than you do in real life. At least, I'm projecting that you're probably going to have less big contracts on your team. And you know what? You can probably also, at a certain point, make, once a guy like Von Miller, who was traded in real life, a guy like Chandler Jones, who was, a lot of trade rumors. He didn't end up getting traded, but a lot of trade rumors surrounding him. If you want to address your outside linebacker spots, you could trade for a guy like Von Miller. You could trade for a guy like Chandler Jones. You can sign somebody like a Trent Williams or even a Taylor Moton to really solidify your left tackle. You can hand out that big contract for a guy like that because, I'm really hoping that, if it was me being the actual general manager, before this season, once the penalty left, I would have cut Nate Solder and I would have replaced him with a big free agent. That would have been me. But obviously, that's all up for speculation. That's all up to what you guys would do. But you certainly could cut Nate Solder and his bad contract, to make your books look better and replace him with somebody better. If you wanted to do that, there are endless possibilities. That's the point that I'm trying to make. There are absolutely endless possibilities that you can do when you have a young, stud-filled team like this. The only problem that you're really going to have to solve is in 2 or 3 years after that, how are you going to sign everybody? How are you going to re-sign everybody? Who are you going to prioritize? But that's a great problem to have. I think the team turned out pretty well here, but let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Let me know, if you want to look into it yourself, let me know who you think I should have drafted. Was there any flaws in my logic or anything like that? I'd love to really have that conversation with you guys. I'd love to really get into that. This is something that I really enjoy doing. I mean, this redraft was something that I've been very excited about starting for a long time, and it is a lot of work, but it is a lot more fun than it is work for sure. So certainly, if you guys enjoyed it, let me know, and I'd love to keep doing it. I'd love to do more of those. And if you guys have any suggestions of a team you'd like me to redraft from any era, I will do the best that I can to kind of give you guys what you want. So please do let me know if there's any ideas that you guys have. All right, so let's move on to all things Boston here. Going to be another short aspect here. So I wanted to quickly talk about the Celtics and, where they stand as the All-Star break kind of comes to an end when I am recording this. And then obviously I think it will be over by the time you guys see this full episode. They currently sit at 34 and 26th. Which is good for the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, which does not sound all that great, but when you consider the fact that the difference between the 6th seed and the 3 seed is 2 games, and the difference between the 6th seed and the 1 seed is 4.5 games, I think the Celtics are in a really, really good spot. And especially going 9-1 in their last 10 games before the All-Star break. They had a 9-game winning streak going into the last game before the All-Star break, and they ended up losing that one to the Detroit Pistons, again, right before the break. And honestly, I'm actually a little glad about it. I always hated when I used to play basketball or when I used to play baseball or whatever the case may be. I always used to hate when, your team was on a roll and you had to go on a long break. Or you had to stop practicing or you had to stop playing games. You felt like, you were in a rhythm. You had a lot of good momentum going. And, oftentimes these big breaks, they really ruin that for you. I think that I'm pretty glad. Let's look at the Patriots, let's say. I think this is a good example. The Patriots had, I think, a 7-game winning streak before their bye week. And then after the bye week, they pretty much stunk for the rest of the year. Like, it just wasn't good, which is weird because Bill Belichick teams are usually better after the bye week. But for some reason, it's like they got out of rhythm. They lost all that momentum, and then they couldn't figure it out after that. So, you see that more often than you probably should. I am kind of glad that the Celtics had a bad taste in their mouth going into the All-Star break. And, especially because they didn't really lose the game against the Pistons because they played poorly or because they shot poorly or because they played iso ball the whole time. It was actually the opposite. They played really well. Just the Pistons played fantastic that day. I watched the game, right? So the Pistons played absolutely out of their minds. There was a stretch in the second quarter where I think all 5 of the people that were on the floor for the Pistons hit 3-pointers in a row. Like, it was just like they didn't miss. Like, they just kept chucking in threes, contested threes, open threes, off the dribble, catch and shoot. They were just making everything. They just had an unbelievably good night. And even with that, the Celtics lost by 1 on a last-second really tough jumper by Jerami Grant with Jason Tatum in his face. And the Celtics were on the second half of a back-to-back where they were in Philly the night before and then flew back to Boston to play the Pistons. And they were without arguably their 2 best defensive players in Marcus Smart and Rob Williams. Now, you can throw Jaylen Brown in there as well, and I completely agree with you. But you can make the argument that Marcus Smart is the best perimeter defender and Rob Williams is the best interior defender on that team. So that's where I'm making that leap in logic. But either way, 2 of their top defenders certainly were not playing. The Celtics scored 111 points. And if their defense was as good as it had been in that 9-game winning streak, that would have been a double-digit victory because they were giving up, I think, 99 points per game on average, maybe even less. So, if their defense held up like it had been the last 10 games, they cruised to that victory. But instead, the Pistons just decided that they weren't going to miss shots. Whether they were contested, not contested, it didn't matter. So, I'm not really worried about the result of that game. Sometimes a team just has a phenomenal game and there's literally nothing you can do about it. The Pistons came to play, and that's it. That happens. Obviously nobody's going to say that the Celtics are terrible because they lost to the Pistons. At least I hope nobody's going to say that. Nobody reasonable should say that. So again, I'm not really worried too much about the result. So, where do I think the Celtics are in terms of contention? I think over the last 2-ish, 3-ish weeks, they've shown that they're capable of hanging with the best teams in the NBA when they play at their best. When they play the type of ball that Ime Udoka is preaching, which is, a lot of ball movement, a lot more passing, just never stopping. And when they're playing the type of unbelievable defense that they have been, they are capable of competing with the best teams in the NBA. However, I do think that the people that are saying the Celtics are favorites and the Celtics are the best team in the NBA and the Celtics are going to win the championship, look how great they're playing, they're destroying everybody. I think those people need to calm down. I think that they're blowing things a little out of proportion with that. I think the 4 or the 5 seed is a pretty reasonable undertaking for the Celtics. I think that they're going to be in the middle of the pack there. For the rest of the season, I think that's pretty much where they're going to sit because I don't see them being better than the Bucks. I don't see them maybe even being better than the Heat. They might be better than the Heat. I don't know. But I think the Bulls and the Bucks are going to stay where they're at. I think they're going to be the 1 and the 2. I could see the Celtics getting the number 3 if they play really well. But I think the 4 and the 5 seed is pretty reasonable for them to finish. And, once playoffs start, it'll be completely determined on one, health. Can the Celtics keep their core guys healthy? Can Marcus Smart stay healthy? Can Rob Williams stay healthy? Can Jaylen Brown stay healthy? That's been a bit of a question the last couple of years. Jaylen Brown's been battling injuries, and if those guys aren't healthy, then the Celtics have no chance no matter who they play. And that happens all the time. So it depends on health, 1, and 2, which of the Celtics teams that we've seen this year show up. If the Celtics team that showed up in the first half of the year shows up in the playoffs, they're going to get absolutely run off the floor by Cleveland. Like, it doesn't matter who they play. They're going to get absolutely run off the floor because iso ball will not work in the playoffs consistently. But if it is the Celtics that have played the last 2 weeks where they're unselfish, they move the ball, and they play the best style of defense in the NBA by the numbers, if that team shows up, then the Celtics have a good shot. I really believe that they at least have a good shot to go to the conference finals. I do think that they have a shot. But again, if the team that showed up in the first half of the year shows up, they're going to lose in 5 too. It doesn't matter who they play. They're going to lose in 5. They are not, when they play iso ball, they are not better than the Cavs. They're not better than the Raptors. They're not better than the Knicks. They're not better than the Nets. They're not better than the 76ers. They're not better than the Bulls. They're not better than the Heat. They're not better than the Bucks. That's 8 teams. There are 10 teams that make the playoffs / play-in tournament. The Celtics probably, honestly, wouldn't even make it out of the play-in tournament if the first half team shows up. But if the one that the Celtics have been playing, if that team that the Celtics have showed to be over the last 2 weeks, if they show up in the playoffs, look out. The Celtics really could start to make some noise in the playoffs. But again, to summarize, I think I'll say the 4 seed. I think that's a reasonable thing to say for the Celtics. If they stay playing the way that they were before the All-Star break, if they continue to move the ball, if they continue to play great defense, I think that they will end up being the 4 seed in the East, and I think that they'll end up playing maybe Cleveland or somebody like that in the first round. And I think it's going to be a really, really great series, and we'll see how it goes. But that is going to do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this week. And I'm so grateful that I get to do this every week. And just thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.
Hey guys, me again. I just want to say thank you so much for checking out the Lopes Goes Last podcast. It means the world to me that you decided to stick all the way to the end. That's super cool. So thank you again. And if you really, really like what you see, I'd love for you to subscribe, like the video, and share it with all your family and friends because, this is my passion project. This is what I love to do, and I really want the sucker to grow. And the only way that can happen is through you guys, is if you guys can help me out. So again, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, like the video, share it with all your friends and family. That's the only way this is going to grow. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.